Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the British Culture Podcast. I'm joined here again by Sam. This time, Sam, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. Have you had a terrible day today? Have you had an absolutely awful, horrendous day today or not?
My day had been fantastic. I had done many incredible things. I had smiled. I had sang songs. But then unfortunately it was ruined because James sent me a text message and he said, Sam, we need to record a podcast. I demand you. So my day had been amazing until you called.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And as usual, Sam is here against his will. If he could choose, he would be doing anything but this. But no, he is forced to sit here and make a podcast for me and for you guys. So you should be thankful for Sam's sacrifice today. Anyway, the
James,
topic...
Very quickly, before we get into it, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Did you hear?
Did I hear what?
Did you hear that if you go to englishsponge.com, we have over 520 videos ready for you guys right now. Premium starting at just $8 a month. Already over 120 premium videos in the library and more are being added all of the time.
Are you finished?
Yes, I am. That's the plug, guys. Sorry.
Very naturally inserted plug there. Thank you, Sam. Anyway, so go to englishsponge.com. Guys, the topic of today's video is going to be classes in the UK. Now, I don't mean classes like English classes. What I mean is like the lower class, the middle class, and the upper class. You know, because in every society, you know, in basically every society, you have different classes, right? I don't think really there's a country that exists that doesn't have different classes, okay? So we're going to talk about what the classes are like and what it's like to live in each of the classes in the UK specifically. And Sam, we're going to start by talking about the lower class, okay? Let's talk about the people who are...
The working class, shall we call it? The correct term for it.
We could certainly call it the working class. Yes, that would be perhaps a more correct term for it. Yeah, I'll go with that. And of course, you know, being working class is very common. It's very normal. But so I want to talk a bit about what it's like to be working class in the UK. Sam, how would you define like working class? How would you know if you were a working class person in the UK?
It's a really good question, actually, and it sort of gets us straight into the difficulties of a social class system immediately. Because there is, of course, no clear line, no clear set categories that would define somebody as working class, as middle class, or as upper class. The primary part of being working class is, of course, working. Being somebody who works for a living, your entire family will be working, and it tends to be hands-on jobs, trades. Being an electrician, a plumber, a builder, or working some other what we call non-skilled jobs. Jobs like working in a shop, working at a fast food restaurant, working, I don't know, in a whole range of what we would call non-skilled work. I think those would be the first major things that I would look for to consider somebody as working class.
Yeah, I think those are some good identifiers of perhaps a working class person. I want to talk a little bit about something that we call chavs here in the UK. Sam, I assume this is still a word, is it? Do you still use the word chav? Is this still a thing?
So chav is still a thing, you are correct, but the chav, we're going to have to start off with a description before we get into whether chavs still exist or not. So just briefly, James, can you explain to everybody what a chav is? And perhaps here would be a good time for some photos as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely put a few photos up here. First of all, it's the kind of clothes that chavs tend to wear. You might see a chav wearing a tracksuit, like an Adidas tracksuit, right? You might see a chav wearing perhaps like a gold chain around their neck. You might see a chav wearing a baseball cap or a cap in front of their eyes like this. Another thing you might see a chav with is like a dog, right? Like, and not like a little cute dog, but like a really aggressive, like huge dog, like a Rottweiler or an Alsatian.
I think you've missed the most typical one, James. A double XL bully.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really know what that is, but I can imagine.
Those were the dogs that were banned in the UK not long ago because they kept like biting children and things. And lots of chavs were very up in arms against it.
Yeah, so that's the kind of dog that a chav will have. I think the idea of being a chav is to come across as tough, right? To come across as like a tough guy who can't be messed with. That's the idea of being a chav. And so that's what it's all about. Sometimes chavs will kind of hang around outside of shops. Like, for example, the local shop where I live, I remember when I was like a teenager, there would be these, to be honest, stupid chavs that would just hang around outside the shop all day. And these chavs would basically just hurl abuse at random people who are going in to do their shopping. They would hang around outside the shop with their big dogs. They may be smoking a cigarette, right? And the thing is, they think that they're really cool. They think they are the coolest guys on the planet, or girls, right? But they are so not cool. They are absolute morons most of the time. A chav also may also have like a car with like an exhaust, like a really loud, on purpose loud car, right?
So you'll have like modified exhaust.
Yeah, a modified exhaust that goes when it's going past. And everybody hates them. But they think they're the coolest people in the world. However, they are lower class and working class. And most chavs, you know, are not living in luxury, let's say. They're usually living in relatively small houses. They may be unemployed and so on. Sam, what do you think about chavs? Do you like chavs? What do you think?
So, something that I'm surprised you didn't mention. So I'm going to ask, did you know, James, that chav is actually an acronym?
I think, no, I did not know that, actually.
CHAV is an acronym, and the word came about because it stood for Council Housed and Violent. That is where the word chav comes from. Now, a council house is social housing in the United Kingdom. If a person is in a situation, especially with children, and they do not have a place to live, the council, which is our local government, will give them a house. At least traditionally. It doesn't work quite so smoothly today. But the word chav comes from the idea of being council housed, so being put into a house by the government and having a violent streak, be that performing robberies, petty crimes, or just violence against other people. I will say the idea of a chav definitely is not as prevalent today. When I think back to when I was younger in the United Kingdom, there were chavs everywhere. But now, the sort of subculture, I guess we can call it, has died out a bit. People don't dress the same anymore. It's a little bit more difficult to see if somebody is a chav or not. They, of course, still exist, but they're not as typical as we used to imagine them. They have been very caricatured in the UK. And as a result, I think people have moved away from that image.
And thank God for that. I despised chavs back in the day. I suppose something else is that chav girls would also have a certain look, right?
The
Chav
massive
girls.
hoop earrings.
That is exactly the first thing I was about to say.
Massive hoop earrings, fake lips, badly contoured makeup, I think it's called. Yeah.
And a lot of fake tan as well, like orange looking kind of thing. Now you may,
Sorry, it just reminds me of when we used to go to school. There was a little corner shop right outside our bus stop. Now, most people, when they went into the corner shop to buy an energy drink, would buy a Red Bull, a Monster, one of the typical brands. You could always see who was a bit of a chav based on what energy drink they bought. Because they would come out with the Tesco own brand 35p energy drink. The thing that costs like less than $50. Yeah, that was always a very big sign. And they all smoke cigarettes as well. That's a very telling sign.
Yeah, and there are certain things they all would always say, right? Like they would always say, like, in it, bruv, in it. Or they'd be like, I ain't doing that,
mate. Ain't my problem. Yeah, ain't my problem.
This is not good English and you should not repeat it. But, if they had a problem with you, they would say something like, you what? You what, mate? Yeah, in it. Like that. As you may have guessed, I'm personally not a chav. But that is the kind of thing that they would say. Is there anything else they would tend to say, Sam? Do you think of anything else?
Not that I can think of that can go on the podcast, unfortunately.
Yeah, nothing.
So, for example, now the word bruv, BRUV, has become very, it sort of superseded classes. Everybody says bruv now, who's a young person in England. But that was something that definitely came from the lower classes. So yeah.
But yeah, it's fairly normal now, yeah. So those were the lower classes, and those are chavs, okay? Let's move on to the kind of the middle class, right? So in the UK, what is a middle class lifestyle like? I suppose I would probably say that personally I'm probably middle class, right? If I had to guess, that's probably what I am. Sam, how would you describe like the typical middle class lifestyle and in the UK?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is the idea of middle class in the UK is very, very broad. And the difference between someone in the lower middle class and the upper middle class is much, much larger than somebody who is working class compared to lower middle class. The most typical lifestyle, I would imagine, is having two parents, normally who are still together, but of course not all the time, who are both working professional jobs, normally office jobs or something with a career. So like a policeman or a fireman, something like that. Working two professional jobs in order to pay off your mortgage. Most people in the UK have a loan on their house, so that's what the primary income is to pay off the mortgage. Usually they'll have two cars as well, one for each parent, because they both need to get to work in different places. I think a big sign of the sort of extent, I guess I can say, of how middle class you are the cars that your parents drive. Someone on the lower end of middle class might still have quite an old car. Whereas if you get to the upper end of middle class, this is when people start driving more luxury vehicles. Range Rovers, Jaguars, brand new cars, Audis, things like that.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess something else I would say is that stereotypically, someone who's middle class will probably have like a 9-to-5 office job. That's obviously a massive stereotype, but generally when you think of like a typical middle class person, they work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in an office somewhere. And generally, when I think of the middle class, I don't always feel that positive about it. The middle class, to me, a lot of it is quite stressful. It's lots of bills to pay. You've got your mortgage to pay for, you've got your taxes, and you know, maybe you might have children, you have to pay for your children. To me, it brings up ideas of a fairly stressful life, although not too bad. Right? Being middle class is quite nice sometimes. It can be quite comfortable, let's say. But it can also be like stressful with the bills and the money. And I think the average middle class person is definitely concerned about money. They are concerned about paying their mortgage, and they are concerned really about saving money for the future. I think probably the average middle class person is not really thinking about, I don't know, like, you know, starting a business really or anything like that. The average middle class person is really just kind of sticking to their routine and trying to maybe get a promotion at work. Mm-hmm. Is this true, or am I talking gobbledygook, Sam? Is this all gobbledygook?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, James. I think you really hit the nail on the head. Realistically, especially over the last 10 or so years, Britain has become very, very expensive, especially housing in Britain. And from when our parents were growing up and our grandparents were growing up especially, you could support a family on one working class salary. Now you need 2 middle class salaries at least to support a family of 4. And yeah, money is a very, very major thing that people think about. Now, the thing that used to be the big dividing factor between the working class and the middle class was actually university education. Those who were educated at university and came out with a bachelor's degree, at least, tended to be people in the middle class. And actually, that was the way of social mobility. Social mobility is when you move through social classes. For example, my mum and my dad both grew up as working class kids, and they grew up in working class households. But they went to university, they got degrees, and as a result, they moved through the social classes and became middle class. Today, unfortunately, a degree from a British university means nothing, as my sister can attest to, and as I can attest to. Everybody has a degree, so it's no longer something that separates you from others.
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and talk all day about how the middle class is being destroyed in the UK and probably in many countries. But yes, I think it's about time to move on to the upper class, okay?
Ooh, you suck.
Boo. That's right. It's time to talk about the scumbags at the top. Now, that depends. In my mind, especially in this country, in the UK, there are 2 kinds of upper class people, okay? I like to think about it in terms of old money and new money. So to me, a new money upper class person would be somebody who made their money in the last 30 years. Somebody who managed to really move from the lower class or the middle class through a business or through winning the lottery or something, pure luck, have managed to actually become upper class. And, you know, these are the kind of people really I can really respect, I think. You know, the people have actually worked to get there. Maybe they've had a bit of luck along the way, but they've actually worked and they are now upper class, and now they can afford, you know, a bigger house than usual, maybe a nice car like a Mercedes or something. I would consider that probably an upper class car, maybe a Mercedes or something like that. And to me, that's like
It depends where you live, James. Because in lots of areas in the UK, so in certain towns, especially towns that are majority Asian, a Mercedes is a normal car. I see many working class people driving around with Mercedes just because they want to show off and try and demonstrate their wealth, even though they don't have any.
Yeah, and probably the car is rented month by month, right? So yeah, no, the upper class can afford to actually buy a Mercedes and they own it, you know. It's not, so obviously a common tendency of the lower classes is to kind of waste money on this kind of thing to try and like pretend that they are quite wealthy when actually they're not, right? But when you're the upper class, I think of like ownership, like somebody who owns properties and assets and so on. Now, when it comes to the other side of the upper class, the old money upper class, these are the guys which I think I'm not such a fan of, yes? These are the people you might imagine with vast acres of land, and they've had money in their family for generations, back from the British Empire. And, you know, they probably talk a little bit like this, you know, it's kind of like this kind of posh voice. They're kind of like a bit like Boris Johnson, the ex-president, the ex-prime minister of the UK or someone like that.
What? I hate his name. I just hate him so much.
I think Sam just vomited live on a podcast.
No, that's genuinely, that is the reaction. I'm not putting it on. That's the reaction I get every time I hear his name. Horrible, horrible human being.
Yeah, and you know, all of our prime ministers, I think, and major politicians have been really had an upper class background, as far as I know. I could be wrong. And they tend to go to the same colleges. They'll go to Eton College, and then they'll probably go to Oxford or Cambridge University, and you'll find that it's really just the same clique, the same kind of clique of people, and really anybody from outside their little group, really it's difficult to become like the Prime Minister in the UK. Is that true, Sam? And I think I already know what you're going to say, but what do you think about the upper classes in the UK? Do you like them?
I don't think we can ask a question as simple as like, do you like them here? Because it's such a like nuanced and complicated question about something that doesn't have a set boundary, right? If there were a list of things that you could look at to say, yes, this person is definitely, you know, upper class, they fit all of the conditions, then perhaps yes. But it's much more blurry, and it really links to your own understanding of the British class system.
In that case, Sam, in that case, Sam, how do you feel about the kind of upper class people who go to Eton College, Cambridge, and Oxford?
Oh, I despise them. I despise them. There is massive social inequality in Britain, as is there in most of the world. We're not a special case by any means. But what I have found is so noticeable about inequality in Britain compared to other places I have travelled or lived in is the inequality is institutional. And it's very, very directed from the moment that you are born. It all starts at school. For me, when somebody tells me they were privately educated, that is the biggest sign that they are part of the upper class. And immediately, by being able to pay for your education, you access so many more opportunities, so much better education, more time with teachers. You are given the biggest foot up in life by being able to pay. No child chooses the family they are born into, and I think absolutely everybody should start in the world on as equal footing as possible. I very much disagree from a moral perspective with the idea of private education. I can't sit here and just say, you know, awful things, horrible things all the time. But the class system is something that is very historic in Britain, and it's very much built into the fabric of our society. There is a reason why Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto whilst in Britain, because he saw just how clear and structured our class system was. I don't have so much issue with new money, like you described. People who genuinely worked hard to be in the position that they were. I think that's completely fine. We live in a capitalist system, and therefore, some people are going to be rich, some people are going to be poor. But it's those who only achieved their position through nepotism, through the virtue of their birth. That is where I take issue. And to link it back to my favourite talking point in the United Kingdom, the royal family. Yeah, I knew you were waiting for those words, James. They sit at the top of society as a sign for everything that is wrong with the class system in Britain. A family who did nothing, do nothing, and will do nothing to achieve that position. Simply, their ancestors were better at war than ours were, and therefore we are their subjects. If you want to listen to me complain about the royal family more, we have 2 amazing videos on it. We did a podcast episode on them, and we have a special premium episode where I stand in front of Buckingham Palace and complain about them. I think everything you need to see and you need to understand about the upper classes in Britain can be understood through the lens of the royal family. Immense, incredible, crazy wealth, which they did absolutely nothing to achieve, or nothing to earn, I guess is the better word, yet they still take money from us in our taxes.
Yes, as usual, Sam, not pulling any punches when it comes to the upper classes and the royal family, not pulling any punches. And I think on that note, I think it's a good time to wrap up this podcast. So today we talked about the lower classes, the middle classes, and the upper classes really in the UK. I hope you found this podcast interesting. And of course, we do have many more episodes of this podcast on EnglishSponge.com. You can go to the British Culture podcast series, and there are lots more episodes you can listen to here at the B2 upper intermediate level. If you prefer to stay here on YouTube, I'll put a link here to another podcast episode. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.